The autumn rain tapped softly against the windows of a small farmhouse on the edge of town. Inside, 42-year-old Daniel Harper sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. 3 years had passed since his wife Emily had died from a sudden illness. 3 years of raising his 10-year-old daughter Sophie, alone. 3 years of pretending he was strong enough to carry the weight of grief by himself. Most days Daniel managed. Some days he didn't. This was one of those days. The house felt too quiet. Sophie was spending the weekend at a friend's birthday camp, and for the first time in months, Daniel was completely alone. He sighed and looked toward the family photo hanging on the wall. Emily's smile still seemed alive. "I miss you," he whispered. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Daniel frowned. Nobody usually visited without calling first. He opened the door and froze. Standing on the porch was a woman he hadn't seen in nearly 20 years. "Sarah?" The woman smiled nervously. "Hello, Daniel?" For a moment, neither spoke. Sarah Bennett had been Daniel's childhood friend. They had grown up together, attended the same school, and spent countless summers exploring fields and fishing by the river. Then life had pulled them in different directions. Daniel had married Emily. Sarah had moved away for college and built a successful career in another city. And somehow, 20 years had disappeared. "What are you doing here?" Daniel finally asked. Sarah glanced down. "My father passed away last month." Daniel's expression softened. "I'm sorry," she nodded. "Before he died, he gave me something." She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. "It's for you." Daniel stared at it in confusion. "For me?" Sarah handed it over. "My father insisted I deliver it personally." Daniel recognized the handwriting immediately. It belonged to Robert Bennett. The man had been like a second father during Daniel's childhood. His hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter. "Daniel, if you're reading this, then I've finally gone where old men eventually go. I don't have much time, so I'll get straight to the point. You were always a good man. After Emily died, I watched from afar as you carried everything alone. But even the strongest people need someone beside them. Sarah has spent years taking care of everyone except herself. You've spent years doing the same. Maybe I'm an old fool, but I think two lonely people deserve another chance at happiness. Don't ignore this letter. Love." Robert Daniel blinked several times. Then he looked at Sarah. "You knew what was in this?" She laughed softly. "Unfortunately." "And your father really wrote this?" "Absolutely." Daniel shook his head. "That sounds exactly like him." For the first time, both of them smiled. Daniel invited her inside. They spent hours talking. At first, the conversation felt awkward. 20 years creates a lot of distance. But gradually, old memories resurfaced. They laughed about childhood adventures. They recalled school pranks. They shared stories of people they had lost. As evening arrived, neither wanted the conversation to end. For the first time in years, Daniel realized he had spent an entire day without feeling lonely. When Sarah finally stood to leave, he surprised himself. "Would you like dinner tomorrow?" She smiled. "I'd like that." Dinner became coffee. Coffee became walks. Walks became regular visits. Over the next 6 months, Sarah slowly became part of Daniel's life. More importantly, she became part of Sophie's life. The little girl immediately adored her. One evening, Sophie sat at the kitchen table doing homework while Sarah helped her with math. Daniel watched from across the room. His chest tightened unexpectedly. Not with sadness, with warmth. The house no longer felt empty. It felt alive again. Later that night, after Sophie went to bed, Daniel found himself standing beside Sarah on the porch. The stars glittered overhead. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Of course." "I was terrified after Emily died." Sarah looked at him quietly. "I know." I thought if I ever felt happy again, it would somehow mean I was forgetting her. Sarah's eyes softened. And now? Daniel stared at the night sky. Now I think Emily would be angry if I spent the rest of my life miserable. Sarah smiled. That sounds wise. It wasn't my wisdom. Whose was it? Sophie's. Sarah laughed. Smart kid. The smartest. For a moment, silence settled between them. Comfortable silence. The kind that only exists between people who genuinely understand each other. Then Sarah spoke. My father used to say something. What? He said loneliness grows when we feed it? Daniel nodded slowly. Your father was right about a lot of things. Most of the time. Even about his letter? Sarah looked away shyly. Maybe. Daniel's heart beat faster. For months he had been trying to ignore what was becoming obvious. He cared about her, more than he wanted to admit, more than he expected possible. But fear still lingered. Fear of moving forward. Fear of losing someone again. Fear of opening his heart. As if reading his thoughts, Sarah gently touched his hand. Daniel? Yes? My father said something else before he died? What was that? He said you needed a wife. Daniel nearly choked on his laughter. That sounds exactly like him. She smiled nervously. Then her voice became softer. He thought maybe that wife could be me. The words hung in the cool night air. Daniel stared at her. For a moment, 20 years of missed opportunities seemed to stand between them. Then he remembered something. Life was fragile. Tomorrow was never guaranteed, and happiness rarely knocked twice. Sarah lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Daniel gently squeezed her hand. No. She looked up. No? He smiled. My father said you needed a wife, she whispered. Daniel's eyes filled with emotion, and then he answered the only way he could. He was right. Tears appeared in Sarah's eyes. A second later, they were both laughing through those tears. Not because anything was funny, but because sometimes joy arrives after such a long absence that it feels unbelievable. 1 year later, family and friends gathered beneath a canopy of oak trees behind the farmhouse. The ceremony was small, simple, perfect. As Sarah walked down the aisle, Sophie proudly carried flowers ahead of her. When Sarah reached the altar, Daniel took her hands. In the front row sat an empty chair. On it rested a framed photograph of Robert Bennett, the man who had refused to let two lonely hearts stay lonely forever. During the reception, Sophie raised a glass of lemonade. I want to make a toast. Everyone laughed. Daniel nodded. Go ahead. The little girl grinned. To Grandpa Robert. The guests smiled. If he hadn't been so nosy, Sophie continued, none of us would be here today. The crowd erupted with laughter. Sarah wiped away a tear. Daniel looked toward the photograph and smiled. Thank you, old friend, he whispered. And somewhere beyond the noise of celebration, beyond grief, beyond regret, and beyond years of loneliness, it felt as though Robert Bennett was smiling too. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives in a simple letter, a whispered sentence, and the courage to answer, he was right,